We long to hear our stories be told. We're made for this. This isn't just a thing that we have to do as a way to heal. Like, okay, otherwise, if we'd never sinned, we wouldn't really have to do this storytelling stuff and reveal. Like, if we hadn't sinned, we would be doing this this is how we would be living all the time.
Hmm.
Without guile, without shame. This is what we are storytellers. It's how we live.
There is a longing in every human heart to be seen and known. Sometimes we wonder, does anyone even see me? Does it even matter? Do I even matter? As we begin the Seen series, I couldn't think of a better podcast guest than Dr. Curt Thompson. I deeply admire his work in the space of interpersonal neurobiology and how it intersects with our faith in Jesus. In today's episode, he shares with us about the power of storytelling and how it helps us heal. He also shares a beautiful perspective on the story of the bleeding woman. Hi, friend. If you've ever wondered how God's Word connects with the messy, broken parts of your story, you're in the right place. Welcome to Beauty in the Brokenness, where we have honest conversations about the Bible, our real-life struggles, and the hope God brings for healing. I'm your host, Teresa Whiting, an author, Bible teacher, and trauma-informed life coach, but mostly a friend and fellow struggler. No matter who you are or where you've been, I'm inviting you to encounter the God of rescue, redemption, and restoration, the God who is still creating beauty right in the midst of your brokenness. Well, welcome, friends. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Curt Thompson, today. Dr. Thompson is a psychiatrist, an author, and a speaker who, in my opinion, is a master at weaving together the understanding of interpersonal neurobiology with a Christian view of what it means to be human. He helps people process their longings, their grief, their identity, their purpose, their perspective of God, and their perspective of humanity, inviting them to engage more authentically with their own stories and their relationships. He's also the author of several books, two of which are my favorites, The Soul of
Mm,
Shame and The Soul of Desire.
mm,
And he's also the host of the Being Known podcast. And if you haven't listened
mm,
to that yet, I highly encourage you to go over and give it a
mm,
listen and a follow.
mm.
So, Curt, thank you so much for being here today.
Teresa, thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be able to have our conversation together. Yeah, really looking forward to it.
I'm excited. Before
Yeah.
we jump into a lot of the questions I have for you, would you just tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself? And if you want to throw
Hmm.
in a fun fact, that'd be great.
Well, sure, thanks. Well, probably some of the important things for me are I've been married to Phyllis for about 38 and a half years. And we have two adult kids, Rachel, our daughter Rachel, who's married and who gave birth to our first grandchild about 3 months ago, which is a
Oh,
big deal, right?
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have a son, Nathan, who's 31. So those relationships have been, I think, over the course of the time that I've been in the world with them, have been most formative. I'm really grateful for that. I don't have words, and I often say to people, I don't deserve my life. And my wife and my kids would be, and now our grandson and son-in-law are evidence of that. Um, I grew up in Eastern Ohio. I'm the youngest of four sons, and but for my day job, I have the privilege of living here in the Washington D.C. area, practicing as a psychiatrist. And over the course of the last 35 years or so, I've had the opportunity to work with people in a range of different medical and psychiatric experiences that they've had. And anybody who's a psychiatrist or a therapist would say that, our patients are the ones who teach us more about life than anybody else in the world. And so it's been humbling and gratifying to be able to do that. And then over the last 20 years in particular, have had the privilege of doing this work at this intersection of the emerging field of interpersonal neurobiology, kind of a fancy schmancy term for lots of different scientific disciplines that have a stake in being curious about what is the mind and what is a mind that is flourishing, really being curious about that and its intersection with a Christian anthropology. As you said earlier, what does it mean for us to be human when we engage the biblical text, when we encounter Jesus? How does that inform our science? How does that inform all the things? Um, and that brings me then to the privilege of having this conversation with you. So, yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled. First of all, thank you for that, telling us a little bit more
Mm,
about yourself. And one of the things that you have said often, and it's I feel like it's part of the fabric of what you do and teach,
mm.
is that we all come into the world looking for someone looking for us. And I know we're
Uh,
jumping right into the questions,
so
but
yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many things I want to talk about, and I want to really jump into understanding that statement. Can
Mm,
you unpack that? Like everyone comes into the world looking for somebody, looking for them.
mhm, mhm. Well, I think, if we were to take the world only on the world's terms, meaning like if we don't look at the Bible, if we don't do, which much of the world doesn't look at the Bible, isn't really thinking about those kinds of things. If we just look at the world of how we come to understand how humans develop, eventually, and especially as we're informed by the mechanics of the mind, which is what interpersonal neurobiology kind of reveals to us. How does the mind work? What is the mind? How does it work? How does it work well? What does it look like when human beings begin to flourish? We come to recognize pretty quickly that we human beings are not isolated, siloed beings. Now, the world might tend to teach us that that's who we are, not explicitly. It doesn't say, oh, you are by yourself in the world, but we subtly and implicitly form people into believing that that's what we are with all kinds of implicit messaging. Uh, and what that tends then to do is to put a lot of pressure on each of us to believe that I go, my goodness, like I'm by myself in the world and I need to figure out things and I need to make my way in the world and I self-identify in the world. And what's so interesting is that the neuroscience would teach us that none of that is true. In
Mm.
fact, that when a newborn comes into the world with about 100 billion neurons ready to go in their brain, only about 15 to 20% of those neurons are really able and ready to go to do what that newborn needs them to do. The other 20 to 20%, the other 80 to 85% of those neurons, in order for them to become fully functioning, actually need to have an interaction with another human being, have to have an interpersonal relationship. In order for me to grow into a human, I need to see someone seeing me. I need to hear someone hearing me. And of course, in the world of interpersonal neurobiology, we're really looking at the research in the field of attachment that shows us that we become more fully ourselves through what we would call co-regulation of our emotional distresses. We become more fully ourselves when I hear my story being spoken by you as you hear me tell my story.
Mm.
I don't ever become fully who I am apart from my interaction with other people. Hence, I come into the world looking for someone who's looking for me. And when you find me, moreover, when I become aware that you've come to find me, that expands, that enables me to become more than I otherwise would have become. And then we say, like, oh, those are just the mechanics of how the mind works. But then, when you look at the second page of the Bible, actually the first page of the Bible, we see that when God is creating the earth, when God is like naming the things, right? He's bringing order and purpose. He says after day one, day two, day four, day five, day six, it's good, it's good. And there is the sense in which, at one level, we would say, oh, that's God looking at an object and saying, this thing that I've created, it's beautiful, it's good. What we sometimes miss is the nuance of the Hebrew, which is also saying that the goodness that God sees, the goodness, the beauty that God sees, that word good is interchangeable with the word beauty in the
Hmm.
Hebrew. The beauty and the goodness actually emerges as a function of being seen.
Mm.
So we think, how many people in the world today, their lives are going to be made different because our listeners are going to go into the world and call forth beauty in other people's lives by virtue of seeing them. I'm not just recognizing their beauty, but I'm calling it forth by giving them the experience of being seen by me. So that's page one. And then we get to page two of the Bible where we read, it's not good for the man to be alone. right? We read, let us make mankind in our image. This notion that we are made as social creatures. We are made as male and female. This notion that, like, I do not bear the image of God apart from the fact that there are, as a man, apart from the fact that there are women in the world. And the same is true for women, that there are men in the world. We together are the image of God. And so this notion of how the mechanics of the mind reveal the depth of the purpose of our being known and being seen, right? Everybody's looking for someone looking for them. We would say, well, of course, it's a reflection of what we read about that people have believed in the Judeo-Christian heritage now for over 4,000 years.
Hmm.
And so I think it's really important then for us to know that, oh, goodness, in order for me to flourish, I have to answer the question, by whom am I being seen?
Hmm.
By whom am I being heard on a regular basis?
Yes, yes. And that's why all the things that you're explaining, this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you because I'm currently writing a Bible study called Seen, and it's
Yeah.
all about that that desire, that need, that innate wiring that we have to be seen and known. And I love how you weave in both the interpersonal neurobiology and the biblical truth. Like
Mm,
this
mm,
is a God-given thing. And honestly, like I feel like for myself, I have at times felt like I want to be seen. I want to be known. And I've
right.
almost
Totally.
seen that as like a flaw or oh, that's a weakness. That's me
Mm,
being prideful or whatever. Like
mm, mm,
how do you explain that
mm,
as a
mm,
good thing?
mm, mm. Well, I'm reminded of this. I mentioned earlier, 3 months ago, our daughter gave birth to our first grandchild, and even though they live in Nashville, we live here in the Northern Virginia area, so we don't get to be in person. But they're moving to Charlottesville, so we'll only be 2 hours away. I hope my daughter and son-in-law don't mind the fact that every weekend I'm going to want to be in Charlottesville. But even so, we see pictures, we have little videos of our son Simon, our grandson Simon, and this felt sense of looking at him, looking to be seen. And I mean, anybody who's been around newborns and infants and toddlers, right? When they are completely unabashed, they are guileless about wanting to be seen. They expect to be seen. Right. And we would never say to a 6-month-old who's looking for the parent, looking for them, we would never say to the 3-year-old who's looking for mom and dad, especially if she's in distress. But even if she comes in with her new art project that you have no idea what that is, right? But she's looking to be seen. We wouldn't say, "Oh, that what are you doing?" No, we of course, like of course they do. And then we get to the Gospels where Jesus says, unless y'all change and become like little children, heaven isn't going to work for you. This notion that we are practicing for heaven, we are practicing for a kingdom that is coming in which it will be necessary for us to be able to tolerate the gaze of a God who is coming to find us with utter delight. And as you know, we like to say when patients are coming into our office, like we look, we have all kinds of symptoms, range, trauma, anxiety, depression, addiction, you name it. And so much of this is we look around and gosh, they're having a hard time. We see that loving other people is not easy for us to do, right? And love seems to be so absent in our current cultural moment.
Mm.
And so we say, like, we're not very good at that. But the reason we're not very good at it is because we can't give what we don't have. And what that means is that the thing that we're even less capable of doing is being receptive to love. We think that love is a good thing. We love until love actually shows up.
Mm.
And then because it shows up and it wants us to give it the opportunity to let us be seen by it.
And
And
that's scary.
it's a terrifying thing because all of our trauma has taken place in the context of intimate relationships. Our mind remembers that intimacy, as much as we long for it, is dangerous. It's like, look, I can't get away from being thirsty. I have to have water to drink. But what if the water that I've consumed has been contaminated? And that's mostly what I know. But I can't stop myself from being thirsty.
Mm.
And so I can't keep myself from longing to be seen. Of course, I might want to say, oh, I should be able to do this by myself. I'm going to feel bad if I long to be seen, because that is evil at work, trying to get us to forget that we are made as relational creatures, that this is what we are made to become. But the very thing that we then long for, evil wants to reroute that and say, oh, no, that's not what you should need. You should be able to do this on yourself, by yourself. And so, even the work that you're doing, Teresa, these Bible studies are so crucial for folks, because they ground folks in a text. It creates a hard deck for in a text, a textual study that enables people to have the felt sense that this longing that we have, as much as we are imperfect at directing it, uh, that longing is the eternity that God has placed in our hearts, our hunger and our thirst for Him.
Mm.
And so that we have it is evidence that there is a God and He's coming for us.
Yes, yes. And so in the study, there's going to be six different women
Mm,
that are from scripture, like Hagar and Leah and the bleeding woman, who, were completely discarded, forsaken, cast off by the world, and yet God came looking for them. And
mm, mm,
you mentioned this little phrase, like the gaze of God.
mm,
And I would love to press into that a little bit.
mm, mm,
How do we accept that? How do
mhm,
we acknowledge that God
mhm,
has come looking for us? Like he's
mhm,
calling us by name.
mhm,
He's pursuing us. And yet, like you're saying, like there's this fear of intimacy. There's this fear of
mhm,
really being fully seen and fully known, even though that's what
mhm,
we long for. We're afraid of it. And yet, how do we get to a place where we are accepting and
mhm,
enjoying and living in that beautiful gaze of God toward
mhm,
us?
mhm. Well, in the soul desire, we focus attention on the fourth verse of the 27th Psalm. This notion that I will dwell in the house of the Lord. All the one thing I've asked, I will dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, that I might gaze upon His beauty. I may gaze upon His beauty. And there are multiple dimensions of that beauty, and one dimension of that beauty is not just I'm gazing at something that is beautiful, like the Grand Canyon or the Pietà or a sunrise, but I'm gazing at someone who's gazing at me.
Mm.
We have this exercise that we do for married couples that at first is somewhat uncomfortable for them, especially if they're just coming into the office in the wake of having a fight. But we have them sit knees to knees, looking at each other, and we give them the assignment. We're going to give them just 5 minutes of this. We say, we're going to ask you, take a couple of deep breaths, and then we're going to ask you to look at each other with loving kindness. We want you to gaze at each other with loving. Now, I don't want you to stare. You can blink, you can turn away, but I want you to continue to. Of course, this is very unnerving,
Hmm.
if you can imagine.
I
Like,
can
imagine
feel
you,
it.
right? Even the people that we like the whole notion of like looking at people, right? When you look at newborns and infants, when parents and grandparents just love to look at their kids, and especially if their kids are looking at them and they're smiling and so forth. But there will come a moment when, for the child, the gaze will be too much, and they will look away, and then they'll return. They'll look like we. It's like, oh, it's like I can tolerate looking at beauty. I can tolerate this for a certain amount of time, and then I have to like catch my breath, because it's almost like it's too much.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there is a sense in which we have to practice doing this, and that's a rhythm, right? It's not because it's because we're made as rhythmic creatures as well. We could say more about that. But the whole point then is that when we have had so much experience with trauma, the notion of intimately connecting with someone else very often touches those parts that feel frightened, touches those parts where my ruptures have not been repaired,
Mm.
and then it feels painful to be seen in that space. And so we'll take this couple and we'll ask them to sit knees to knees and gaze with each with loving kindness. And they're protesting, like, do we really have to do this? And so forth. And it will take them somewhere in the range of 30 to 90 seconds to get comfortable with this. And once they do, And they just breathing and they're looking. And when the 5 minutes are up, most of the time, they don't want to stop.
Mm,
Because when is the last time that you've allowed yourself the joy and the comfort and the exhale of being seen, being gazed upon while you gaze upon someone with loving, like who doesn't want to be seen with loving kindness?
mm,
Who doesn't want to hear the words, "You're here, you're here."
yes.
And so this notion of being gazed upon is practice for what's coming.
Mm, mm. Oh, this is so good. I love it. And
Mm.
one of the things that you talk about as we experience healing from trauma, as we're seen, and part of the healing process, I think, is telling our stories, is
Mhm.
finding a safe place where we can actually not just let people see our face or our body, but
Mhm.
like see the inside, see the things
Mhm.
that have happened to us, the things that we've walked
Mhm.
through, which
Mhm.
again, scary,
Mhm.
uncomfortable. A lot of people are not used to that.
Mhm.
So, I guess my question is, how does storytelling, really revealing the inner parts of ourselves, help in the healing process? What, like from the perspective of scripture, and then from the perspective of the like neurobiology side.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, there is this sense in which um, you mentioned the woman with the bleeding problem, right? And this is how she's known, right?
Hmm.
She doesn't really we don't even really give her a name in the New Testament in the Gospels versions. She's the woman with a bleeding problem. And I think the gospel, in some respects, the gospel writers, again, the Bible, man, like it's so brilliant. It's just so brilliant because they're really forcing the reader. They're inviting the reader to say, like, this is a woman. This is how the world sees her. The
Hmm.
world sees her like, who is she? Oh, she's not Sarah or Mary or Joanna. She's the woman with the bleeding problem. Like, this is how the world talks about a woman of this kind. And not only that, but she has a particular sense of herself, and she sees herself as, I'm a woman with a bleeding problem. This is the essence of who I am. How many of our listeners uh, have a sense that, like, oh, who I am is, and then we fill that blank in with some sense of our brokenness, some sense of, like, I'm divorced. I've been sexually abused. I've been this, I've been that. And these things are not untrue, but these are the monikers that we take on. Like, this is how we understand who we are. This is the outside. This is the outside of her in some respects, right?
Hmm.
It is the outside of her. And yet it's also like again, this story, like, you can't get away from the fact that she doesn't just have leprosy. She has this silent disorder that actually comes from within her, even physically. And it's what? It's the life-giving sense. It's blood, right? This sense that there is this, like, bleeding is going to talk to the one who's going to bleed.
Mm.
Right. And
Mm.
so she, in Mark's version, right, like, they're already in a hurry because they're on the way to the priest's house where the daughter's dying and so forth. And there's urgency in the air. And she has a plan. She has a plan for secret commando healing, right? I'm going to get in, touch the garment, get out. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody, no, like, it's all very silent. And then, of course, she does. And we know the story that Jesus pauses and says, stop. And of course, you can imagine what's going on in her mind. She's like, oh my gosh, like, what has happened? And the text reads that, and she knew that she was healed because she felt it in her body. Now, of course, we wouldn't know it in real time because we don't even know she exists yet. Apparently, she would have had to have told this story to somebody else, and she thinks that the project has been completed, the
Hmm.
healing has taken place, because she thinks that's all that this is who I am. I'm the woman with the bleeding problem,
Mm.
and she's like, nope, we're not done here. And he's not moving. And, like, you can be aware, like, everybody's like, we got to get to the priest's house. And she's a speed bump along the way. So not only all the other reasons why now she's a holdup in the procession, and then she finally comes with fear and trembling. Why should she be afraid? She's been healed with fear and trembling. And the text reads, and she fell at his feet and told him everything about herself.
Mm.
At which point he says, my daughter, when has she ever heard this? She doesn't have family. She doesn't have a marriage. She doesn't have children. She doesn't have a community. She's got like her problem is so much bigger than her bleeding. And it would be easy for us to just assume, yeah, she's healed. It's like that's the issue. And Jesus is not willing for it merely to be the outside of the cup that is cleaned. He's coming for the whole story. And we cannot find ourselves being completely healed until Jesus is allowed to have access to every single acre of the interior part of my story that includes not just me, but also includes generations before me. And it is in that telling everything about us, just like she did, that she can now know healing because she's going to have to go out into the world also. Like, but now the world's going to know something different about her. Now the world's going to know we have to create a community for her. We have to create a family for her. This is Jesus in Mark chapter 3. Who's my mother? Who are my brothers? The one who does the will of my Father. The one who's willing to come forward in front of everybody and acknowledge that she's the one.
Mm.
You imagine how much courage that took? With fear and trembling,
Yes.
she comes.
Yes.
In order for the whole story to be told, in order for the story that she tells in her head, which is that I don't have a family. Yes, I don't have bleeding now, which is fine. But she's not even thinking about all the other elements of her life that she doesn't know that she's not thinking about. But that Jesus is coming for everything.
Right.
And this is the good news, and it can also be the uncomfortable news
Mm-hmm.
because he's coming for everything. Even the things that I don't know about myself. And this is why the telling of our stories to others who are in the position of asking us questions about things about ourselves that we wouldn't even think to ask because we've so long ago buried our
Mm-hmm.
connection to them because they're so
Mm-hmm.
painful.
Yes. Oh, I love that story so much, and I love the way you
Yeah.
conveyed just the heart of Jesus toward that woman,
Yeah.
that he wasn't willing to just let her be healed, but
Yeah.
he had to turn around and make eye contact with her. And he had to
Oh,
let her know that she has been seen, not just
oh.
healed, but seen too. Oh, I love it. And I'm thinking about the listener who has never felt seen, who has
Mhm,
never felt like they even have a safe place to
mhm,
tell their story to anybody.
mhm,
You know, what's a first brave step that they can take to
mhm,
say,
mhm,
I
mhm,
I acknowledge that I need to be seen, that I feel
mhm,
unseen, and
mhm,
I don't even know where to
mhm,
start. Like,
mhm,
what would you
mhm,
say to that
mhm,
person?
mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, Teresa, there is this is a I think a common question that many of us think. Uh, when we hear the kind of a conversation that we're having, my guess would be that there would be those of our listeners who are like waking up to something like, really? Like you can actually do that? You can actually have those kinds of conversations? But really, where can you do this? And it's easy for us to think that this is only a human endeavor until you ask the question that the author Paul Borgman asks in his beautiful book, Genesis, the Story We Haven't Heard. When speaking of Abraham, Dr. Borgman asked the question, who knows how many people God asked to go with him to Canaan before in Abraham he finally found someone who said, yes, I'll
Mm,
go. We don't know because there's no story that's been told there. But it's an important question because, in many respects, what God is doing in asking Abraham to go to Canaan with God, partner with him, is God is saying to Abraham, I want to tell my story, and I want you to be a co author with me in the story that I am telling that I've been telling about the world from the first page of the Bible. Y'all have had challenges with this, but it has not stopped my mission of this is the story that we are going to tell for humans. I'm a storyteller. I want to tell my story. God wants a receptive audience for the story that he's telling. Jesus comes and utters the 7 great I ams in the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life. I am the good shepherd, and all the other 5, and so forth and so on. And for us Christians, these are words of comfort and joy, but they are the same words that got him killed. Which means, what is he doing? He's telling us his story. He's not just downloading information. He's trying to tell us his story. And he wants listeners who will join in the storytelling of this. When you get to Jesus, he also, like God with Abraham, he asks a number of people to help him tell his. Will you listen to my story? And sorry, I got to go bury my dad. I've got to go. I've got to go check out this plot of land. Right? There are plenty of people that Jesus asks to follow him who say no. Mm-hmm. Jesus knows exactly what it's like for us to be in this position of people who are made to tell our stories. We long to hear our stories be told. We're made for this. This isn't just a thing that we have to do as a way to heal. Like, okay, otherwise, if we'd never sinned, we wouldn't really have to do this storytelling stuff and reveal. Like, if we hadn't sinned, we would be doing this this is how we would be living all the time. Mm-hmm. Without guile, without shame. This is what we are storytellers. It's how we live. Jesus knows what it's like to be rejected when he offers and invites people to, would you listen to my story? Would you follow me and listen to my story? And no. And so for those of us who ask us the question, like, how do I do this? Where do I find it? I want to say, look, this is not easy to do. And Jesus knows exactly what this is like. So that's the first thing. I know that's really wordy, but it's important for us to know that this whole notion of telling our stories in this way is what it means to be human. It's not, the thing that I have to do or the only option that I have in order for me to be healed, right? The woman with the bleeding problem, the telling of her story was not just, this is the only option Jesus is giving me in order for me to be fully healed. No, he's turning her into the person that she was said to have been from before the foundation of the world. The telling of her story.
Okay, guys, I'm going to break in right here and interrupt this conversation with Dr. Thompson, but you absolutely have to come back for part 2. Next week, he's going to share about what it means to be known, how we're partners with God in creating beauty, the power of telling our stories. And he's going to give practical tips on how we can actually rewire our brains so that we can tell ourselves the truest stories. Thanks for hanging out with me today on Beauty and the Brokenness. To find anything I mentioned on the episode, go to teresawhiting.com/listen to find all the show notes. If you want to connect with Dr. Curt Thompson, I will have links to all the ways you can connect to him. Better yet, get on my email list because I send out an email every week with links to how you can connect with the guest, links to their books, and sometimes some little background information. I pray that you have eyes to see the beautiful redemptive work of Jesus in the midst of your broken life. I want to leave you with this verse from Numbers 6:24-26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace.